Hi everyone, welcome back into the studio. Well, it's been over a month and it's time for us to do another Western, okay? So what I have here is I've drawn one up and I made myself a Photoshop of this one. So this is a rider and horse and different kind of background and some cows that I really like and Herefords. And so I kind of put it together. There's 9 photos together into this Photoshop. And then what I did is I did my drawing this morning. And this is a 16 by 20. This is a 16 this way, 20 inches this way. And it's a cradle board, so you can see on the side here. I love to use those cradle boards. I showed you in other videos how I made those. And then I prepped it. And I just shot a couple seconds here of what I did when I prepped it is I took a sponge like I normally do and the canvas prep medium, and instead of just wiping it over the whole thing, I did it in small little movements. And what that does is it gives just a little bit of brush texture or textures to the canvas surface. There's not going to be a tremendous amount of detail in this one. I want this one to be more casual, brushwork and stuff in thicker paint. And so I usually, when I'm going to do that, I don't worry about being super smooth on my surface. If I have a lot of detail, like I'm painting a bird or something like that, a lot of small feathers, I like to have a smooth surface. But this could be a little rougher. So then I turn around and I created this drawing of it. I will put a photo of the drawing stuff in the member section. So those of you that do want to paint this, that you'll be able to paint it. Okay. All right. So I love this Palomino too. I'm gonna paint the Palomino. I've got a couple other, and I got a big there, a couple other guys in the denim jackets and stuff. I'm not too happy with that particular look. Now, see, a couple of weeks ago, I was out into the deep range of Nebraska. Take a dirt road, go through this fence, and then go in 4-wheel drive for several hours right into the backcountry. Beautiful valleys, ridges, and stuff like that. I've got a lot of reference photos. And anyway, I ran into one of the cowboys there that was working. This was about a 30,000 acre ranch, and he was moving cows that were on the range throughout the summer back in a little bit closer where it's easier to put them into a different pasture where it's easier to feed them for the winter. And so that gave me an idea that I'm going to do this one here. It's called Moving Cows from High Range. I'm going to do some of those, what you saw in the photo back there with some of the trees and stuff. But my idea is to put just the first little bit of snow into it. And so he needs to have a jacket, a ranch jacket. So we'll get into some of that. But that's where some of these ideas, they come from. So anyway, so let's get started. First, so these are the colors I'm going to use, my standard colors. I do have out the medium beige here, which is a color that I really like to use if I'm going to do a lot of prairie or I love this when I do elk and stuff like that. It's just a mixture of your umber, your yellow oxide, white, and so if you don't have it, you can mix it up like, that. But it's a premix color. I really like it. So I'm going to start first with some of that atmospheric color. And that photo is slightly violet. So let's take just a tiny bit of our phthalo here. And I'm going to get a paper towel here. Tiny bit of our phthalo. Let's add some red, some Quinacridone Violet and some white. Let's look at the blue-violet we get from this. Okay, that's actually kind of perfect there. Beautiful blue-violet. And I want that to play against some of the warm grasses and stuff. So we're going to lighten some of that up here. And I'm going to add some extender medium, which is going to keep it wet for just a bit. We'll just mix this up. Up on the photo there, the sky up there, boy, that's just so close. The sky up there is right around, and I'll put this value scale. I try to remember, keep that up off to the side, but it's right around between an 8 and a 9. And so if you're going to air lighter because they dry darker. So we'll start right in there, and we'll leave a little bit to model this. And let's just go right up, and I'm just going to pull through that back hill there a bit too. Not much room for so much sky into this one, but we'll put some of this on. Drag that down, a little extender. It'll stay wet here for a bit. We'll work this sky a couple times like we normally do. Okay, and but I don't want any brush marks in this. I want this a little bit of modeling and stuff is fine, but overall we'll leave the brush marks off. Let me rinse that out of the brush here with my my water here. So I always carry a big container of water here, just right off to the camera there. So this is the open medium too, which I didn't tell you about. So the open medium, and I'll use that in the thicker areas. This is the extender medium. I use that into the thinner areas and into the shadows and stuff. So I usually start my painting and stuff all out with the extender medium because it's thinner, and I'm a thin to thick painter, you know, and I've, you know, over the years I've used so many different techniques, and if you're following different videos, you'll see all kinds of different techniques. That's what I always feel my job is, studying different techniques and presenting them to you, and then you can choose what it is that you want to do. So what I'm going to do here is just make a real soft green, a little bit soft of a blue green. I'll add some medium beige, or excuse me, some burnt sienna to this. We'll add some extender to this. I'm going to keep this kind of thin, but also kind of bluish here in this. And I'm going to do a couple of things. So what I'm going to do here first is just set in the, I want a little bit more blue, just the tiniest bit of that phthalo, and a bit of that burnt sienna here. What we're going to do is just set in some marks here, up and down, which will give us the feel of the trees. But we'll come back on this. This is just the first look. So I want to do a lot of little marks like this, right up into here, and let some of this mix up here and go atmospheric. See, so it'll go atmospheric. As we come down into the shadows and round into here, around his hat and stuff here, which we have, we'll put a little more color with it here. We'll go right up to the edge there, into his hat a little bit, that's okay. But this is just movement, up and down. And let's vary that just a bit, a little more blue, and a little extender here. Keeping this very modeled and different colors, short movements here, because this is going to be trees into the back. And this is just the first look, guys. We're going to do this like with the last elk. Those of you that painted the last elk with me, I did this and then I came back and revisited it a couple of times. We're going to do that too. This is just background movement here. So we'll get a little darker right up along the front of this hill. Small movements here, up and down, and right up along in here. Give him a green face, right? And so when you look, you know, you just see a lot of smaller up and down movement. That's really what you see. And I want to, you know, with that elk, if you haven't watched that elk, you should watch that elk for painting distant hills. And I come back over with an atmospheric movement to create more pushback, if that makes sense. Now, this, I don't want this. I love this. This background is from up in Montana, and I really love that. I really love it up in Montana. But I love the broken edge of both the grasses and then the trees. And I want to put, maybe like snow is coming. This is part of the story, so I'll put down some grasses there and then maybe a little snow. So first I'm going to take a little of my medium beige, a little yellow, right into some of these greens and stuff here. And I'm going to open this area up with a few here of just some of the, so I have the hills coming this way. I want a few hills and stuff going this way here and down. And then we'll put trees and stuff in there as well. This is just movement. I'm painting only for movement, okay? We're not doing a finished product here, movement. I'm going to add a little light to that, a little white. We'll eventually add a bit of snow into this as well. But I wanted to have a little, so I don't want it just solid trees. I think that is going to be a bit too much, you know, for this. Now we can come back and push in and add some of our little tree, this little vertical, small movements here. And I generally don't use a small brush for this. I use a bigger brush. And I just want to add some of that movement. And we're going to do this several times. Okay, so we realize we're going to do this several times. Sometimes I go through thinking highlight side. Sometimes I go through thinking shadow side. Right now I'm just thinking movement and stuff into there. Now, okay, light is going to come from, I'm going to bring light in from the front right into here. So this puts a shadow in here on that. That's one of the reasons why I love that Palomino there. It gets that. When you do that, you see it's like his rump or her rump is completely lit up, and then you get the cool colors here. So that's one of the things I like to do is I love painting Palominos. In the complete light side, they're a little boring, but when you're looking through a front or a front right or even front left, but you're seeing some of the shadow side, you get the beautiful coloring that we get to go in here with some violets and stuff. So, but long story short, what we want to do is be able to put some of these colors and lights and stuff like that into our back hills here as well. So we'll light up. So maybe up over onto the front side up over here, we'll get that lit up area here onto the right side of some of this hills here. That would be the light back there. Okay, so just tap that through. Let's put in this so that you can get a better feel for what I am doing here. Sometimes, when like if you're going to paint this along with me, it's good to watch it through one time to see where it is that I'm going, because, in my mind, I see it, but you guys don't see it. Does that make sense? So it's good you have a final photo to look at, but sometimes it's good to see kind of where it is that I'm going with this. So I want this kind of brown with a little bit of green and stuff here. This is up on and this was really beautiful when we were out in the back country of Nebraska. I was out with my daughter and a good friend. He was taking us back up through some of these back ranches and stuff. There was, the prairie grasses were changing from the greens into the browns. And that's one of the reasons why they were moving the cattle off and stuff. But it was really beautiful coloring. So I got lots and lots of great inspiration from it. So we'll put a little bit of, I love browns that come from phthalo and green, and sometimes, from burnt sienna and green, sometimes a little bit of the blue in there. So you get a little different brownish color, and add some extender and stuff here as we're going to drag some of these other colors through. And again, we're going to do this several times here. So I'll just model. So model means that I'm going to pick up some of these colors, but I'm not going to mix them up real well. So I get a few streaks and stuff like that into them as I start to apply them, and you get more interest, okay, that way. So round like that. So, and then as I come forward, I'm going to get a little darker. So you're going to see some of this, and we could probably go a little faster for you since we're going to be doing this a couple of times. We'll get a bit of our light and model some of this together right here. Yellows, a little bit of green, some of that. Let's grab our bigger brush. So I lay this color in pretty quick so you can see. But when you do this, you want to kind of follow the slope, because you're going to get these streaks. See these streaks here? That's what's going to give you the feeling of the sloping of the grass. Now, I want this one maybe up just a bit, because I'm going to create a little valley here, rounds down and then pulls down. Does that make sense? So, and see, those little bit of streaks help you, you want to leave those streaks. Those little bit of streaks help you see where that, the feel for basically what we call the linear perspective of the painting here. So we'll drop some of this right down in through here. And again, we're going to do this several times, but this might as well get some of this in here, right? And let's add maybe a touch of more burnt sienna, a little bit of the blue here into this. Too much of the blue, just a bit here, and we get that little area of that little valley that I want to push in there, and we'll get the idea of it lifting up. So see, I push up slightly, and so you get this feeling of there's going to be a little valley kind of thing there, a little, and then we'll pull this one down into it here, just like that, down into it there. So we'll create a little V into it. I like that in there. And then a little bit of a straight angle. Now that's just our first look at it, but it's going to be great. We'll do that. Let's grab a little bit of the streaky dark through here. Right, we see some of that modeling that's all in there. We'll add some of that right in here, following that slope several times through, though, is going to give us lots of interest and stuff in there. And down here by where the cows are and stuff, we'll start to flatten out just a bit, so they're not walking on a hill. So we'll start to flatten out a bit. And I think I'll just take I almost touch into water there. We'll take a bit of the this light color here, and let's just shoot this on right in here. We'll go right through our cows because I'm that transparent. I don't need to. We're just blocking in, getting a good feel for the painting here, what the painting's going to do here. And I'll just block in. So I want it more flat here. I want a bit of angles here. Watch your calligraphy, your angles. This is going to go up a bit like that. There. And if you see, I go through a second time here, it smooths it out a little bit. So don't do it too much, right? We have a bit of that darker interest right over there. So let's add just a tiny bit of that brownish kind of bit. I like that right up over here. Maybe there's something right in there interest-wise. So we'll just add some streaks through there. That'll be a great place right there by that palomino. Right there, maybe a bit more through here. Here, maybe angle slightly. There, that's pretty good. A little bit maybe on this back hill here. You can even angle some back the other way here and create like two different types of looks to the hill. So that looks pretty good. Let's rinse that out for a minute. Let's come back over. There's darker trees up here. So we're going to go green, a little blue, a little burnt sienna. These will be the darker trees. They're going to be coming farther forward. So you'll see a ridge line of them coming farther forward. And so let's just use I use kind of the chisel of my brush to make the vertical marks here and pull down a bit. And again, so we'll put these in, we'll come in with some shadow marks, we'll come in with some light marks, but this will start the feel of our trees. And light and dark. And I'll use the edge of my brush, and sometimes I'll roll to the flat to give something a little softer, but a few edges, a few points up a little higher is kind of nice. Gives a little bit more detail, right? And we'll come in here, so a little more paint, a few little marks up high, some lows. I'll be coming back in there and varying the color. This is just your first look, right? So we'll add some right in here. Right up in here. Try not to create like a line. Undulate everything really well. Here. Here we go. So it's like another hill line of trees. Here. Some of that. Little lines here. Right like that. There we go. Now we'll, and I like this. I'm going to pull some of this down just a bit more here, like I see in the reference photo. create that other ridge line right there. And then I'll wipe my brush. Let's go back, pick up a little yellow, a little medium beige, a little white. Now if we pull this way right here, that's highlight, right? Because light's going to be coming in this direction. So we'll make this just a little bit lighter. And it's wet, so I'll pull right up against the edge of that, and I'll get some of that green and shadow up in there, which is what I want to happen here. A little bit more. Let's pull a lighter edge right in here, right like that. And see, this is what I'm going to be doing later on as I add more interest, adding some of these streaks. So like I'll take a little white, a little yellow here, make a light. And this is one of the great ways to do it is with your knife. And so I'll grab it like this. See, this is a little early to do this, but I'll show you. So I'll just drag that like that, see? And I'll push up and down into the edge of that tree to catch, to keep an undulated, what I call an undulated edge. So sometimes I'll wipe and pull down the green to take the edge of that away a bit. But see, by doing that, I make this more of this undulated edge of the land, of the hill here, and it looks more natural. And I like doing that. And so I might come back up here just with a little bit more precise right up against that edge there. Pull it down a bit there. Sometimes, so you can get that edge, but then sometimes you can take your brush like this and pull down and then really create that movement edge down like that, see? And these are all really good techniques. And then I go back and reset my shadows and stuff, but you see you get this kind of a blurry, movement. It's the movement, it's the streaks, the movement that you're looking for, right? So let's take just a bit of that yellow, maybe not quite so white here, and just move some of that right up in here, right? So boom. And to create that nice edge here, just take some of that light, just pull down slightly, just push up into pull down, blur that edge out just a bit. Now, that's kind of the wrong thing to do there because it's making a point right there by his head. So let's blur some of it back this way. And that works better. Here we go. But we'll do some more. Let's take a bit of our dark right there and pull some of that back down into that. But I work the edges. One of the things as I started to paint westerns and wildlife, more so than florals or anything else, was the working of the edges. We work the edges, the transition between the color passages. We call that the edge. And so sometimes you blur them out, sometimes you create movement back and forth between there. And it's those working of the edges that can make it sometimes seem very real. So let's put a bit of that right back up in here. Pull that right down. Pull this down like that so we get that, because that's the light side, right? And so sometimes I'll just blur that off. Sometimes I'll leave it pretty harsh right there. But I like that. And then let's just blur a little brown in there, a little medium beige, right? Create that light coming down like that. So as this starts to dry up, you're going to get different types of edges in there. Does that make sense? So we'll work that several times, and we'll work this like this little hill coming down this way a little bit, but it can't be quite as light as the other side because this is the shadow side, right? So we'll create like this little ridge line in there, a little bit of burnt sienna and blue here. We'll create some of that shadow line coming down, this little ridge line coming down in there. This little valley kind of thing right in there. That looks kind of neat. And it's just, it's just putting in stuff that just adds interest to your painting. So, I'll come back and after I get my cowboy and stuff done, maybe add some more stuff through there. So, but you can see now how atmospheric those back ones way are back there, right? Pretty atmospheric. And let's get a little more blue, a little more burnt sienna, a little green here. And these will be the shadows. So I'll be coming back through here like this with what we call shadow, thinking the shadow side of some of these trees here and stuff, and be adding some more shadows and stuff in there to get more interest in. And then once I make these darker, then I can walk back up through here and add a few more shadows back up through the other ones here, to the other sides up over here, back up in there. So I'll thin that out. Let's thin it way out, even make a little bit atmospheric here. And then you can come back in here and add probably a little bit more blue. A little bit more. But that's what I'll do each time. So when I make this a little darker here, I'll be able to come back up in here with some smaller little marks, shadow marks here, adding more interest into that hill back there. And of course, letting it go even more atmospheric as it goes that way. That's the important part, but a little bit in here. So what you want to do is, you see as the front here is the darkest, then this will be a medium, then this heads more to the sky. That's what we're going to do. And sometimes I end up just coming back in there and just adding more sky. But see, just little marks like this. So a few little marks like this, and then blur them out. You'll blur them out a bit until you get more of a tree look. And you work back and forth like that. And that works pretty good. And then if you want to give the impression of snow, we'll go into our violet sky here. A little bit of white, some of our violets here. Just a bit of the violets. So in the cool side of snow is mostly violet, and the warm side is mostly oranges and stuff. So we can give a little bit of the look here, like there's a bit of it coming back up there. And again, I'll do this a couple times, but I like that. Here, a little undulated edge, drag it over a bit, like that, right? And a little, just a bit whiter, maybe a touch of like an orange. That is what gives a nice warmth to the light side of the snow. So you see a bit of it's white, but it's actually a really light orange. And that's what gives the impression of that there. So we have a little bit of that, and we might, as we go here, we might add just a line or two, of it right up in here. Maybe just a bit of it, so it looks like, this is what they're doing. They're moving cattle out from this range out into a little closer to home, easier to feed and take care of for the winter here. And boom, a little bit of that right out through there. Maybe just a bit right up in here. Usually, if you have an early snow and stuff, and it'll go up, of course, to the high elevations, but then it'll stick in anywhere that you have shadows. So it would stick a little bit more down in here before the daylight sun would burn it off or melt it down. You can put a bit of it down in there on the shadow side, just a bit of it. So you see just a touch of it. I like that. But I'll work this again, okay? So we'll work all of that again. We're going to get some more of that gives us a good start here to know what we're going to do. So we'll continue some of our blocking in. Let's just take some beige here and a little bit of water, or I just can use water because I want this to dry fairly quickly here. And we'll just base in around the rest of the cowboy here and the cows, and then we'll come add some color to the cows so we can start to see this painting, what it's going to look like, and we'll add more stuff. So I'm nowhere near done. Nowhere near done. This is our first look, right? And I've learned that over time is I don't want to get too focused in on one area trying to finish it before I move through and get some of the other colors, because of several things that I've talked to you guys about in painting, simultaneous contrast, that kind of stuff. That will bite you. You'll just end up having to change even more of it. You know, if you start doing too much of it, you know, getting too much of this stuff in right now, you're just going to end up having to change it, right? So let's just put some of this color in. We'll block in, so we'll have a good feel for what we're going to do. There's going to be her tail here. Always love the palomino and the buckskin, my favorites. And horses. And so we'll just add a bit of that. Yep. And my grandkids have said, Papa, we want horses again. I was like, woo, horses are a lot of work. I had them for, you know, all kinds for 25, 30 years, and they're a lot of work. You know, it's like, well, you girls, you know, it's a lot of work. But anyway, so that sets that in. I'm going to just touch up just a bit because, you know, certain areas that I want to advance, I want to make sure that I'm going to have good, clean lines. And then other areas that I want to recede, I've got to, you know, make sure that I have nice, softer edges. Edges are important. Edges are what is going to make our entire painting here. So, all right. So that's good. Let's take out a, let's see, brush-wise, maybe like a 10 or something, an 8 or a 10. Flat, you could use also, I love the filberts as well. So, but I'm using older brushes, so 8 or 10 here. And let's start blocking in. First, I think I'm going to block in some, I'm going to start with the burnt sienna kind of colors. Now, this area here I want to clean up just a bit so I don't get this too much. But I'll use greens and everything into my burnt sienna colors. But you just wipe your palette there. That's the nice thing about Heritage. You can just add a little water and wipe it off and use your area again. You know, you can do that for several hours. But let's come in. Let's start with some of our darks. So burnt sienna and a little bit of blue and a little bit of violet. These are some of the dark colors. Let's establish the darks. I'm going to add extender to it. Because that's what I use to help get the transparency for my darks. And I'm going to find, I love this photo and stuff of it, I'm going to find where my shadow colors are. That's a beautiful, rich shadow. Where some of my deep shadows are. Look at how that is going to advance in this painting. One of the good things to get some of this in right now, you know, get some of this dark in here. But the dark is a little bit transparent because I have some extender in it. And so my brushwork I want really casual. So just kind of tap this around. We'll leave him a little bit of a lighter belly here. So this is a little bit, let's give him that right where his barrel is going to be here. Right in there, maybe a bit on the back side of his rump there. And we'll carry this down to his leg before he gets to the light part of his leg. And it's going to be fairly dark because I'm on the shadow anyway. And he gets a lighter belly there, a little bit here before it goes to the light of his leg. And these are just our real darks. So here. And of course we do this a lot, several times. But just round him up, maybe heading now into burnt sienna, a little bit of extender. But as I start to walk back up the scale, you know, burnt sienna is a 3 to a 4, depending on how we use it. I can start making this a little more opaque. You know, I generally try to, anything below a 5 though, I try to keep a little bit transparent. below a value 5. So let's just keep it a little bit transparent for right now. And we'll push some of that in, some of that nice modeling, right? Some of this goes right up here to the top by his shoulder, right in there. That's good. And a few little shadow marks. He's going to be fun to paint. You get all these colors in. Now, I love the color Burnt Sienna and Diarylide Yellow. It makes a beautiful cow color. And sometimes I'll make it a little brighter orange by adding a tiny bit of the Naphthol Red Light. Now I'm going to go more opaque. Sometimes when I start with these a little more opaque, I start to add a little open medium. But you can see it's real thin here, and see how opaque this is? I want these colors to be a bit more opaque. These are going to be our light colors. You know, where we have our, these are our mid-toned, we're mid-tone painting up into our lights here. So these are going to have more volume to it, right? So we'll put a little bit onto his hip there. And of course, we're going to work it several times, right? And it's just kind of like cookbooking it in, where we, you know, remember the old paint by numbers? Some of you remember the old paint by numbers? And, you know, it's kind of like you just kind of block it in. I like what, you know, you always hear. I was watching, we had some people painting in the studio here this last week, and I put in John Howard Sandin, some of his painting videos. The one that we watched was his painting of Lady A, a recreation of a sergeant's, and it was just really, really good to just listen to his. But he uses a poster block, what we call this poster block painting in, you know, leaving some of those areas of color that we will turn around and add more to. And now I'm going to opaque even more, a little bit of yellow oxide and white. I use the yellow oxide because it's yellow oxide. It's an oxide. It's already very opaque. And we'll just toss some of that in here into some of this nice yellowy areas, light areas on the cow. And like I said, we have a long ways to go, but this, and I'll just tap it into some of these areas here. That's going to give us, we'll be painting them. This gives us our modeling of our tones, right? Doesn't really have too much of this. It's more dark right down in through here. So I'll darken it down just a bit, right? That's better. Could have a touch more dark, a little more blue and burnt sienna. A little bit go through that area again here. Now what I do is when you're doing this, see, I'm kind of curving my brush. I'm always reading the calligraphy, the movement, you know, because that form, that movement gives you the shape, okay? So I'm finding his anatomy and, you know, his points of his anatomy here that I am just kind of following the shape. We call form following strokes here. So in this, now we'll let's cool this off a little bit. This is some of the white, but I'm going to add a little blue here, which is going to gray it, cool it off. So here is pure white. You can see I'm nowhere near that. And I don't need to be anywhere near that. So we're just going to touch in to some of the lights here. So this will come down his chest. They have this big lap and chest here. And we'll go through here. I love the Herefords, and we'll put some in here. But I have all kinds of other cows. Those of you that are just getting in some my westerns, you'll see them, you know, all over the place. You know, here around in Nebraska, we have a lot of red Angus and stuff. And a few longhorns. There are a few longhorns up by Scotts Bluff. And I go out to take pictures of them. So we'll add that right in there. Let's add just a little more light right here to help keep that away from the background there just for right now. So I see his anatomy. A little bit more light right here. We'll start right up here and down to his hoof. They're a lot of fun to paint, so we'll drop that in. We need to put a little bit of this is actually too light. It needs to have a cooler shadow because that's the inside, right? So the light coming through there, this would actually be in a little cooler shadow. If it gets too blue, add a little bit of your burnt sienna to it. But it needs to be a little bit cooler there on that inside, his walking leg there, maybe this side as well. We'll vary all of that as we get going here. Some of this right down in here, and we'll get that. I really want to paint their face pretty quickly here because that to me is going to be a lot of fun here. So that's his legs there, okay? So let's go slightly warmer, lighten it up a little bit more, slightly warmer. Let's go right up here, and we'll block in here, the front. Now, pull down right in here because that's their anatomy, pulling down right there. Let's take a little bit of the dark right up along that edge. Maybe clean up this holidays. This is what we call holiday. Clean that up with a little bit of medium beige so it comes forward. Let's go back to a little bit more light. As I go light, I'm going more opaque, right? And let's put in a big ridge up above his eye here and down through here. We're going to paint with a smaller brush too, which is going to help a lot. But right now I'm just blocking in. And what you'll hear a lot of artists say, we squint down. And what that does is you're squinting down and it gets rid of, and that's what I do when I look at something, I squint down and it gets rid of the medium values. And so I open my eyes up to see the medium values, but I squint down to see the light and dark, and just how much light and dark I need to apply basically to get the first go around of form. So I don't need to have a tremendous amount of detail into the painting now, just light and shadow. And so that's kind of what I'm doing right now. So I'll draw into this cheekbone and stuff here. We'll draw a little bit more light, and then I'll go back to, let's cool this off a bit more, and back into some shadow here, and light and shadow, a little bit more gray, and maybe a touch of extender. That also makes the color not only transparent, but a little slipperier, a little easier to apply here. So that'll be some of the shadow. We'll whisper that around a bit as it goes right up here by the side plane of his face there. And let's drop a little bit around that eye socket here, which we're going to build that big socket there around the edge of his nose here so we can see where his nose is. Let's drop it up under the shadow of this horn here. That'll happen so it's shadowing this side of his face. So and it's basically a block. See, it's basically, the light side, shadow side. This would be a receding. And you can drop a little bit of the other tones in there, but we'll do all of that in just a bit. We'll add a few other little marks of shadow marks here. That'll give him his interest. We'll take some of that shadow mark around through there. That looks pretty good. He's pretty light. He's got that nice reflection in there. So but we'll just keep it light right now. We'll add those warm reflections and stuff in there in a bit. Let's go back to a little bit more, almost a flesh tone, which is yellows and a little bit of red, and lighten that up a bit. And we'll paint that right across the front of his nose here. More of a fleshy tone, that's what they have. Maybe a bit that comes up the jawline, just a touch, right? And let's just take some thin burnt sienna. I do this sometimes to keep my drawing. I'll, just take the edge of like a burnt sienna here, a little darker, and this helps me preserve some of my drawing here. See the lines, that's a bit big, but not too bad. And just tap in to see that front of his face there. But I'll use that. Sometimes I do this with a, as you're sketching, you see me in other westerns and stuff, I'll do this with the point of like this right here, very small bristle. And that works really, really nice. So I take the little point of the bristle, because the bristle will make a line that isn't a perfect line. The fusion sometimes will make a perfect line. The bristle, will make a more fractured line, and that's all you want. So I'll use it like this, see, and it's almost like doing a little bit more sketching here to, preserve some of those shapes that you see here. But it's not a perfect line, it's a fractured line. So it is easy to change later on. That's why we do it. Let's just take a bit of burnt sienna and blue here, and we'll touch just a bit into there for his eye. Maybe just a bit of a mark there. We'll just touch that in there like that. Whoa, gave him a nice big round eye, which we don't want to have. But we'll do that. Now let's just use that gray, and we'll use that in for his horns here for right now, even with the bristle here. See, I love the bristle. It's real casual line. Very nice casual line right now. So we'll do that. That works pretty good. So this is the blocking in stage. That's our first stage. Blocking in. And here we go. And let's sketch back. This will be some of the feet. So see, I love that real rough kind of sketch back that the bristle can do, so that works really, really nice. So I'll put a little extender into that. That'll get us good for right now. I want to just reinforce some of my shadows here. Little extender here. A little bit more on the right in there. Reinforce some of those darker side shadows here. Burnt sienna and a little blue here, right? We get that nice feeling of shadow on this side of him here. And it was a little bit dirty from the light, which is making it a little grayer. So if I do that, like you see, this color's a little different. So, and that's okay. I'll let it happen. I just won't use it absolutely everywhere. So it just looks like I have another color going in. So it just got a little bit of light in there, and that's what grayed it. And that's okay. I don't let that worry me. I'll let that sit as a different color, and I'll correct that later. So I'll get rid of that, out of that for a second. Let's go to yellow and some burnt sienna. Maybe a touch of the red. Lighter orangey kind of color here. Reset this in a bit. See, I'll go over some of those other edges. That will soften them. But it builds up just a little more color. Nowhere near done, but starts to really look neat as you start to get some of these other tones in there, right? Yeah, but we got to make sure that we stay with his anatomy here too. So we'll do that as well. Make sure we hit that round, and we have some sinking parts. They get that real big hip bone right in here. And got to make sure that we express those correctly. So here, right up. I love that. Love being that casual like that. A little bit more side plane of his face. So That advances. That's good. That's a good start on him. And so now what I'm going to do is, so I don't take up too much time, we're at 50 minutes in here, so you see that. I'm going to do the same thing over here on this cow, following these same colors, same kind of patterns and everything. Put it out over here, and then I'll come back and we'll do the horse, okay? So same thing again, okay? See you in a minute. Hi everyone, welcome back. Okay, so I just plugged in same color, same type of thing. I'm going to make some more changes and stuff to it as we move along, but I think that that's pretty good for now. So now let's go in and block in the horse and then the rider, and we have to decide on which jacket we're going to use too. Okay, so the palominos, I love the palominos. Palominos are going to come in here, and I like the yellow with just a little bit of the violet and green in it, and it just makes beautiful colors there. And of course, you make it cooler and grayer with the violet and with additions of violet and green. So I look to see just about how much yellow, and boy, that's just right on in this area right here. So, and I'll probably lighten this up a bit so I can move it away from the ground. I'll take some artist license here, and let's just lighten that up. And I'm just going to set this color in because we have to do our shadows really first, but I want to see what my lights are going to be like. Boy, that squares off her rump a little too much here. So let's just get that down like that. Right across, probably going to be just a little bit lighter. I'm going to put a little of that Diarylide in there just as a bit of a difference. You know, when I paint like this, like, you know, those of you that follow me all the time, you know I love to just slowly change those tones. It just gives so much interest. Okay, so now down into the shadows, we'll add some burnt sienna in the green here, and a little bit more burnt sienna, just a little bit of the green. See, that makes this lovely richer tone. Let's add a little extender so it's transparent just a bit, and we'll use that down in here. Yeah, that's a beautiful tone. And I can vary the green, sometimes add just a tiny bit of blue here, and maybe a little bit of violet here, just to change those tones up. And that's the, you know, so we don't, yeah, that's beautiful. See how that deepens the tone here. So we can fold this down her leg here, and a little bit back here. Right now we'll put some in just for some of that tail, but the tail is generally lighter because, you know, it is on the palomino, but it's right in shadow, and you can see that gets pretty dark right in there, in that tail there. But that's a beautiful tone. So let's put some of that back up here, back up onto her chest. They have a big V that comes off that front leg here. And let's go burnt sienna, a little bit of that red violet, tiny bit of green. Change the tone up just a bit here, a little thinner, and let's grab that neck here, down almost like a little V shape here, up this side just a bit. So, yeah, that looks pretty good. Let's get the inside of this leg here. We'll do more structural or anatomically correct stuff here as we get going. We'll watch all of this very closely here. But, and then over a little bit lighter and up, so I'll just lighten this up a bit. Right up through here. And I'm just using my 10 flat too, by the way, here. Right in between the two, little extender. Just pull down. Again, this is just the first. We're going to put a lot of tones in her, but that's pretty darn close to where she is there. And a little bit lighter here on the front, on her front leg. We'll pull that right down here to the front Hereford, a little more light and white, and we'll go right up onto the top of her neck here. Yeah, like that. And let's work a medium. So I go right, but here's the light, the shadow. I go right in here. I create a halftone just to soften that expression, those expressions together. I'll go a little darker right here to help soften that. That's halftone painting, and that's what even when I block in, I love to paint halftones. I don't blend anymore like I used to. Used to always have to keep everything wet and blend, but I love halftones. Let's go again, mix the tone up, and see, every time I mix the tone up, it's slightly different, and that's what makes it pretty. So it's a little different right there. That's pretty. And oh, that's a nice color here for coming down on her, right down into her belly there, right down in there. That's kind of neat. That's a beautiful tone, maybe just a touch lighter. To carry down this back leg here on the shadow side. Yeah. I'm going to darken that just a bit as it goes up, right up by that saddle. Yeah, that works. So it's this really good, gives you a real good kind of poster blocking in of the entire painting, and then we can come in and paint more interest and stuff. Now gray, slightly here, little green will gray it because the burnt sienna and stuff heads more towards the reds than the green, so they slightly. So, when you look at a burnt sienna, it's really kind of a toned orange. Well, blue's the complement of that, but of course, what is inside the green? Blue, right? And of course, if it slides red, the green is there to stop it as well. So it's a good neutralizer here for this, and let's lighten that up just a bit. So on her face, up here, you'll notice the tone is a little bit, and I look up there, it's a little bit grayer right up here. A little bit lighter than that, but it's grayer. And that's what usually happens with, and see, it's a beautiful tone, but that's usually what happens with the palominos up around their face. The tone gets a little bit grayer. But I don't just isolate that tone. I'll go ahead and add some of that tone down in to other areas just like that, because it carries a nice complement. So I'll come right up over here and put a little bit of that tone as it comes into there. And then we'll remember that tone. See, that this gives such a pretty difference, right? And you can put a nice shinier yellow right out there. Matter of fact, I'll just show you. We'll just take a little yellow oxide, this time pump it up with just a touch of Hansa, and then hit it with a light here up around maybe a 9 or so. And that brighter little yellow right up there gives that other like sunstruck area on her, which we like. And so let's drop that down just a bit, and we'll put that in here for this part of her shoulder. That's the sunstruck area, and that'll make her seem like she's nice and light right there. That's where the light is coming through, right like that. That looks nice. Let's put just a bit more shadow right down here. And let's get back to burnt sienna, green, a little violet right down here, a little bit of yellow. Get back a little bit darker right here. Straighten this up just a bit here. Fade that in. There we go. We'll let that shadow here climb up this side. That, especially for right now, this will help separate her face from her neck. We'll be able to see that. Preserve the drawing just a bit there. That looks pretty good. A bit of this, let's see, it's a little bit grayer, so we add just a touch of more green. A little bit grayer here on this side, right here. It's a little more shadow, a little bit grayer. And cast shadow right here. And it goes quite far down, and that just helps you tell that the light is back up over here, because the light is coming a little bit far, the shadow, a little bit forward here. There we go. And of course, there's a highlight that's going to be on the edge of her eye and stuff like that there. So that'll work. But let's get just a little more shadow right here. That'll help her face come forward for right now. As we lighten the face, then we'll lighten some of the other stuff. Thing is to try to stay as anatomically correct as possible. So this neck, darkest shadow belongs there, and then comes out towards this big muscle. There we go. We'll leave it like that. And maybe just a bit darker. A little bit of blue into that burnt sienna. Right into here. That's that back leg, and then that front chest muscle will come up in front. We'll get more, like I said, we'll refine down and get even more anatomically correct as we start adding more values and stuff. This is our first look, right? There we go. Just like that. That's pretty good. A little bit right here. There. This had a bit of extender. This could be a little darker right in here. I'm just going to go right over that girth strap right there for right now of the saddle. That could be a bit more right in there. That's nice. I'd like to see a little more of a glow up at the top here on the Palomino. So a little more yellow, maybe a touch of that Diarylide, a little bit of white. I hit just a tiniest bit of the Quinacridone Violet in that, and that actually looks kind of nice. But let's just put a little more glow right up there. As this will come down and come down this big shoulder here. There we go. That's a better block end. So you don't get the, it's really light over here. So let's just restate that light. That really helps us tell where the light source is, right? And then, of course, we're going to go whites and stuff like that up here. But we might as well put some of that light there. Some of this real light. Pull down this way. Pull down this way. Here. And then we'll go into that blaze, and I'm going to go to a smaller brush, I think. Maybe even my little bristle here to help paint that blaze with the shadows there. So we don't want to go pure white yet, so I'm going to gray it down with a little blue and a little bit of burnt sienna. Stay away from pure white. But let's just kind of block that blaze in here. There we go. And put some yellow here to that side. Leaving that shadow there as well. Lots to do on this painting, but this is the fun part because we get to see it kind of coming in here. Now, right up into the front, I'm going to go a little more light right here, but it's almost like a little rectangular square right here with what you got to square up her muzzle here, her nose. So we'll leave that right there like that. And then we'll make a gray from our burnt sienna and our blue, one of my favorite grays to make on the gray Palomino and stuff. And then we'll pull down at a slight angle here like this. That will square up the front of her nose and stuff there. A little more light on the edges, but we'll come in and really paint details later. But you pull this, so many people ask me, how do you get that nice squaring off? Well, you paint it like a square. You paint it like or a rectangle, or it's almost a square there, but you paint it, You know how you paint the sides of something and you follow the calligraphy of the sides, this way, then down the front. You do the same thing when you're painting a horse or a cow. This is how we set it up. Yeah, you may round just a little bit, but you put those same types of colors. Now, you look at the reference photo there, she's darker. So we'll add a little bit more. Keep that a little bit more right in there, right into her front. And then she gets that nice dark. So blue and burnt sienna even more. Nice dark for those, her nostrils here. Not easy to paint with a fractured bristle, but again, this is just roughing it in. We're not putting detail, so it actually works not so bad. Let's take some of that color and I'm going to use my stick here to steady my hand. And we'll drop a little bit here in for her eye. Oh, this is going to be a fun painting, guys. This is going to be a fun painting. I'm going to enjoy the details of this painting because she's going to have a fun face to paint. This is going to be a lot of fun. So let's take some of that gray. We'll toss it inside the ear here. This bristle, this does a beautiful, it's all fractured out. I don't know if you can see the detail on it, but it just does a really nice job of, this casual lines. Now let's yellow, burnt sienna, a little bit of those blues and stuff here. The shadow part of that ear. And this one will be the light part of the ear, so yellow and white into that a bit. There we go. We might as well put a few streaks. We'll paint back through this a couple times. A few streaks, not pure white, just model it up a bit. Just so we can see what her forelock and her mane will look like here. Just down the sides here. Just like that, just something just to put in a little bit of that color. That's where she's going to go. We don't need to be absolutely perfect right now. Matter of fact, I want to deepen that shadow on that ear just a bit. Here, burnt sienna and a little bit of blue. There we go. And maybe up underneath here. There. I love to do this type of, let's go to a gray, of sketching. I look to this type of sketching really helps. So we'll put a little bit here on this gray right here. This will help bring it out. Now make sure you get her cheek area here a little bit wider right there so she doesn't get too narrow in the face. And some of that gray will come right down through here. This is just slow down and enjoy and, be kind of careful with your calligraphy. Now, one of the things as we go into some of these other areas, you've painted westerns with me before. One of the things I like to use a brush like this, and let's just say I have the edge of the saddle. I like to go in and it's almost like putting the contact or what's what is called the contact shadow there, but basically think of it like a cast shadow. And I like to just put that on and I'll paint it out as I don't need it. But see, that already kind of lifts up what's going to be the blanket there. Then here's the edge of the saddle here. And I just do it in just rough little lines like that. And that works pretty nice. I'll put it up here on the horn up here. Just put some marks down in there. And we'll do all those details and stuff later, but some of this, just use it as you know, it's like a sketching shadow. You know, it just helps bring it forward, and it's got fractured little edges, so it's easy for us to change. And I love to do that because it's almost like, you know, drawing with your brush here to set some of that. Like there's the back strap and the girth strap right here, and we have a mottled kind of grayish blanket right here. So we'll just model in a little color. We'll change that, but we'll model in some of those colors here. Get rid of some of the whites, just push some of that color in, and we'll add more stuff to it. A little more burnt sienna in it, so it warms it and heads it to a touch more of a leathery color. My saddles were always kind of well, they still are, I have them all. You don't get rid of your saddles. But especially mine, the one that I loved to ride in was my grandfather's. And so I have his. And you don't get rid of them. But we'll add that right up there, the horn and stuff. So yeah, we'll get just a little bit of that mottled in there, just slight color changes and stuff. And then we'll get some of that gray and stuff right back up here, right down in there. That's horse color there, so let's go back. Doesn't have to be exactly the same right now, but give a little more yellow, touch of the color in there. And sometimes, you know, so, you know, I've got a few little holidays here. I just take a color and just kind of scumble. This is called scumbling with the brush. Just kind of scumble it through, get rid of some of those holidays. Get that out there. Let's go burnt sienna, a little bit of blue, darker color, a little more blue than normal, a little darker. Get the idea of his boot out here. And yeah, it goes right up through here. And we'll put the front on and the stirrup and all that stuff. It's a little too much detail for right now, but we'll get that in there. And let's go back to a little bit of our burnt sienna for the bit of that saddle color. Burnt sienna, a little white for that saddle is almost perfect. Just a touch of yellow. That's just about right. But we'll do more shadow, highlight, all that art stuff over it, you know. Okay, so we have an area here. We rinsed it. Just a minute. Oh, I love sketching with this. Take a little burnt sienna here. Let's get back the ground back behind his arm. So that looks good. Yeah. And clean up the edges a bit. We go there. Boy, that horse is going to be fun to paint. It's a really good. It's like looking at the cow, but really just looking right at us as well. I'm going to take a bit of the yellow and the white, make that real light color, and let's give that ridge up over her eye, because that is kind of important there. You don't want to make it too straight. She'll get angry, so we don't want that. But just build that ridge right there. And then model a little bit of that through the light part here. There we go. That's better. See some of that right up here. Yep. Okay. So let's see. Let's just go ahead and take a flesh tone, which is just going to be our burnt sienna and white. And a nice flesh tone. We'll just base in the guy for right now. Right up through his hair, down through his neck. And if we don't put him in gloves, we'll put his hand out here. His other one's kind of covered, so that'll work. And a little bit of burnt sienna and blue for that makes that beautiful brownish color here. Gets just a touch here for his hair. There, that's good. We'll go in and, you know, after we do all the block in and stuff, we'll go in and work on, you know, some of the details and stuff. We might do that in the next video here. But now, well, I'm going to put him in a jacket, but I like this where the jacket's opened up right there, like those guys that are right there, that bottom one right over there on the left. I do like that with the brownish kind of collar. So, but mine has the sheepskin color like that guy over there. So sheepskin color might be kind of neat because it'll bring the colors of the cows and everything like that into him. Now we also have the light hat. He has a light hat. They have the darker hat. I might do him with like a lighter cream colored hat. This is where you make these decisions, right? Let's just take a little medium beige and white. And so it won't be pure white. The hat I normally rode in was kind of a light tan. Here, we'll base that around. There we go. Yeah, we'll fix that up a bit, but let that dry for just a minute. I think that'll be good. But I think we'll give him kind of that reddish kind of shirt. So we'll go a little red, a little burnt sienna here. And we'll do like a little collar of it and a little bit of it showing through. So this is just going to be the shadow of it. Then let's lighten that up a bit. Here. Just pull through. It's going to be a nice contrasting color with the blue and the white. We'll let that dry for a second so we don't blend too much here. Let's go with a light, when you paint the blue jeans, I like them a lighter blue violet. So a little bit of violet into the blue here. Nice light color. Up about a value 7, 8. Let's see, that's pretty close. Could go a touch lighter, but right to the knee, right in this area, right to the knee, and then we'll start to shadow. So it'll be lighter up to the knee. We'll take a little bit of that shadow here up underneath, down this side a bit, right? Then we'll take a little more blue and violet right down here. Model it so it's not, you know, it's not all exactly the same. And we'll use that here. That's where you're going to get your interest. And here. This is going to take a few times, but I love how the bristle gives all these streaks and stuff, and that's really what we want. Okay, we don't want it perfect. We're going to have some fat from some folds and stuff like that we'll do in the fabrics. We'll do that. This is just the idea, right? The blocking in. There. And a little burnt sienna in that will go to a little red violet too. Burnt sienna will tone it. See, so you get that nice, real almost black blue there, which is nice to have in there as well as a color, as a nice variation. And we'll go a little bit lighter right here on the front part of his knee, up that side. We'll fix all of this. This is your block in. Right, so I'll fix all of that with some nice nice values and carry a little color or do that art thing, you know, but this is just a block in so I can see my lights to darks and a little bit of interest there. Just going to go a little bit lighter right across that front. Right in there. That's pretty good. Now, I think I'll use this is my number 10 flat. An 8 or a 10 probably will base in, like if we're going to do a jacket here, that would probably be a little bit better. So let's take a dirty white right now, make a triangle shape right here, which will be the sheepskin collar. Right up, and eventually when we do details, we'll tap some right around his neck and stuff. And mine has, that one doesn't show it, but mine has an edge of it that runs right down. So I will probably put a little edge in there. Just for right now, we'll do that. And then a dirty gray, which is, we have our gray, we add just a burnt sienna to this. And that will gray it up. A little burnt sienna right into this blue here. Make that lighter, but we want to model it. Blue, gray, a little violet. There we go. Boy, that looks pretty good. Pretty good color. So we'll block in, and then we'll add some of the shadows and lights and stuff here. Normally, you know, sometimes I start with the shadows, and what I'm going to follow is the shadows that's on his shirt. So that's telling me the light source. And then I'll just make the shadow colors. You know, if I wanted to be absolutely perfect, I'll make the shadow colors that I see on this other jacket in the photo. I'll get those as the colors, and there we go. Little extender. Here, just block it in. And then we'll add the shadows. But, you know, normally I start with the shadows, you guys. You normally see me do that. But here I'm just finding see if I like the color first. And I do. I like that jacket on him. And I'll fix everything up. We'll get that light color down there. We'll give him that reddish kind of shirt. That'll pull these colors back up to him. That'll look pretty good. But let's get some of the, so we go the jacket color, which is blue and the violet, and then we dirty it with the burnt sienna. That grays it, makes a real dark color. We'll look up to where one of the deep shadows is on him, right up in through here. And that just kind of goes up like that, down this arm here, on this side, here, a little bit up over here. Here we'll find it break. Always we'll have a shadow that crosses right at the elbow there, right where the arm takes that break at the elbow. There. Let's put some right in here. And there'll be a few, you know, that'll pull out and across, usually like right up in there. The fabric wrinkles. Sometimes a little far maybe. A little more extender. Keep this moving right up across the front, down this side, right back in there. There we go. Actually, there's a cast shadow from his hat and stuff. That's going to come right up over here. We'll just pull that down for right now. Get some of that up underneath this collar. Right, that gives a good feel for it, and some of those shadows I'll carry into other things, and you know later on I'll take some of this shadow color, because we'll be painting for harmony, right? You take some of that shadow color and you add it, even though it's blue, you add it into other parts of your painting, and that creates some of the harmony that will join these all together. So, you know, we'll add some of those shadows around the painting. And sometimes, like right now, I do it so I don't forget to do it, because sometimes we get so wrapped up later on in the painting, we forget to do it. So I just do it right now. Add some of those blues and stuff through, and your eye will pick that up. And sometimes I'll take some of those blues, maybe a little deeper, and put them out in some of the deep shadows back here. And that's what a big thing in your painting is, carrying those colors, the harmony of those colors. You know, so yeah, it works. Let's just add a little bit right in there, a little bit there, a little bit here. Very casual, just, yeah. So that causes it to go all together there a bit. Yeah. Now I like just about everything there. A couple of areas before we move on, I want to come back and hit again. Maybe a little bit of the light Palomino yellow right up here on the rump. Here, a little bit more of a golden color to that. So a bit of burnt sienna and a bit of that burnt sienna and Diarylide Yellow is magnificent. I was painting some roses the other day with it, and on some trays, and I just love those colors. Burnt sienna and Diarylide Yellow. Just beautiful colors. I'll do that. There. And I go back and forth too, guys, and I, you know, do I do one big, huge, long one here, or do I do it in a couple videos? And, you know, most people want it one big, long one, but there's a few people that like them broke up. So we might break this one up, because we did the last couple ones, big, long ones. So try to keep everybody happy. You know, doesn't make a difference to me. You know, I watch all, you know, but here we go. See, I love that. Let's get that light, that little edge of light. And then I want to go with the only place we don't have any real shadows of light is on his face and his hat. And we maybe should do something up there. So we'll put a little bit of that up there. And let's we'll get that. Let's rinse that one out. Let me find my smaller brush, like a little 4. That's what this is, a little number 4. And let's get a little burnt sienna, maybe a gray. So we'll keep this kind of white, but gray. Shadow back this side of his hat, right? And it's going to really shadow up in the front. The light will be on this side over here, because light and shadow, right? And light will be right back up all along that top, but maybe a little bit of that shadow there. Okay. And a little bit. Let's find that hat band right here. There. Now let's just lighten that gray up. A little brown here, a little yellow. Want just a real light. Doesn't have to, I don't want the exact same color I used last time, because I want to be able to use it a little different, right? There we go. A little different. And reach this up and around. There. Don't breathe. Right there. Gets a little light and shadow there. Little bit. There, that's coming good. A little more light up into that front. Grab my stick here. Go right up there, pull down. That gives that nice vertical look to it. And might be too white. You know, he's really white over there on that one, but I don't want it quite that white. Give the light front brim here. You know, these hats are so small, so usually when you get the light and shadow in, you've got most of the hat done. But I'll be wanting to touch some other colors and do some things to it as well. So we'll do that, but that'll get us started right here. Let's go up a little bit grayer here. And into a little more shadow on that inside. Blue, burnt sienna. Blue, burnt sienna. Very important colors here. Well, they're complements, right? So they make really good grays. And that's really what I kind of look for. It's just beautiful complements that make beautiful grays and stuff. Let's add a little bit of that up here at the top. There. That looks better. A little bit of that joining this right into here. There. That's pretty good. A little more light up here on this edge though. It's that edge, you know, it's like the hat that we did on packing out. You know, and when I filmed that, remember I said I softened the trees right around the hat, gave that hat that real crisp edge because that moved the rider. That's one of the edges that moves the rider way forward in the design, that crisp edge, and it came right from his hat. So it's one of the areas that I always look for, especially is that little turn and how crisp am I going to make that line, because that really helps bring the rider forward here, especially here because it's up against a area of the painting that's quite far back. It's up against these back hills, right? So yeah, but you could touch that all day several times till you got it the way you want it. There we go. That looks pretty good for right now. We'll probably still touch it a little bit more. But for right now, that's in there pretty good. Might be too white, but, you know, it might be whiter than I want. But as soon as I get some of these other things in, I do like the darker hats. But the original here, the cowboy that I found, he's wearing that straw hat, which I have, Stetson straw hat. Let's shadow that back again on that side just a little bit. Angle this back a bit more. Raise that hat up just a bit. That's going to get us here all. There we go. Yeah, a little touch more. Maybe a bit of yellow into that. Here, warm it up a bit. There we go. Yeah, we're going to have to do a few more things to this, I think. Soften some of that roundness of that out and everything. But we'll get it. We'll get that side in there. Then I'm going to give his face here another coat. Burnt sienna and white. Here, take that up. It'll help reduce the size of that hat right there a bit. There, like that. Let's put in just a touch more burnt sienna here. So we're just finishing up this, the blocking in. So this will be the shadow part of his face here. And shadow part of his neck right here. Right there. A little bit on his hands. There. That's pretty good. He's actually, because the sun's up, most of his face is there in shadow, but we'll bring a little bit of it out here. And a little more burnt sienna right along the jawline. You've seen me paint these little guys a lot. I do them in all the videos, so we'll break it apart here and have a good time with it. But let's go with that bit of that redder shirt here, a little burnt sienna and the red, and get a little more red in there. Burnt sienna and red. And just model the color in there right now. We don't need to go in there and make everything perfect because we've got a long ways to go. Carry some of that down. There we go. You know, what really, really makes it is the shadows. So in a lot of these little small things, I've told you this 1,000 times, so 1,001 times now, you know, you use your shadows to draw. So it's like I put a little curvature here, draw down just a bit. That creates the little collar that can be there. You know, it's just like I do around the horse and stuff. I use the shadows here to draw here. And then you use the lights to set up the final shape, but the shadows actually do the drawing. So I draw through the shadows there. And yeah. And so even though, you know, we're just blocking in, you can block in and have a little bit of fun. So let's just put a bit of that light collar up there. Just drag that down that side, right? Hit that light color over here. A little bit rougher. And just drag that down that side. There. Maybe a bit shows up on the edges right here. That's actually more detail, but we'll just put a bit of that. But yeah, so now we've got it all blocked in. You can see now I want to come back. You know, that looks kind of nice, but I need to do some more light and shadow back there, some more light and shadow back here into the very back. And, you know, I want to come in now that I have this. So this allows me to do a few more darks back up in there. And I don't want to do them evenly. I love that, where you have some different, you know, on that photo, you can really see it big back there. On the monitor, you can see some areas that are like deeper shadows. So we take our green and our blue and our burnt sienna here, which really is important because it grays it. And we'll make some areas of some deeper shadows, deeper tree shapes, right? Here. So I'll come in. Sometimes like this little number 4, sometimes a little bigger. And I'll create some shadow marks that are just different from what we have. Blur some of it out, right? But it will create some different highs and lows, more interest. And then we'll come in and create a few lights as well. I might even add a little open medium, a little extender. Sometimes I like the brush to have a little open medium in it, but it is thicker, so I'll thin it back down with extender because I don't want these shadows to be too opaque. So we'll add some of that. Get some of those shadows. Now those shadows are not competing too much with this, but you know, then I turn around and I'll take some light here, burnt sienna, greens, some of this, some lights here, a little more green. Model this into the brush like this, and really they're a lot of fun. Sometimes you just drag this across like this, and so you're breaking up some of those shadows, but you're adding these little lights. See how it breaks it up? Little bits here. And boom, boom. Just break up some of the big horizontals that you have with some of these real light little verticals. Here. Here, just boom, boom. And it gives you some different looks. On there you see some like aspen and stuff. You can tell that season right there is in the fall because all of the trees that are right over here are all kind of yellowish and changing color. And so you can add a few of those in there, changing colors and stuff. We'll do all that in the next video, I think, as well. But this is what I'm going to do, is break up some of that and add some, a little more green, light and green here that will, little green touches, and then more shadow touches here to really, you know, loosen up those trees. Like you can watch that right over here, see? That'll loosen up some of these trees. See how that does? That's great. Here. Very casual. And then we'll add some darks. Back up to our darks. And that's what we're going to be doing. So we'll, like right in here. And, you know, vary the color right in here. Nice little dark, like right in here. There we go. And, you know, you can, like it's in that corner of that one, you could way back up there in that left corner, you could see like that little bit of yellow and brown here, lighter color. I like that, you know, it dives up like this and then goes back up that way, back up through the trees there. And so you can start adding that kind of movement, break up, you know, break up some of the, just a line, add some of that right back up there, and we'll put some trees up along there. So it's almost like two different, you know, little groves of trees here. Take some of that out. There. Add that other little, right like that. So it's not just a straight line, it's an undulating line. Does that make sense? You know, and that's all depending upon how much interest and how much time you want to spend in the painting. You know, when I put paintings up for sale and everything, when I'm going to be putting it up for sale, I like to put a lot of interest in it. I like to put in what I know in it, and you know, so that the buyer gets really a really good value for their money. So we'll add a few other little smaller ones here, darks. But that's what we're going to do. I'm going to work on this in the next video, do some of that, add some of that right back in there like that. We'll add some more interest, and then we'll come in and we'll start really adding to the front of the painting, okay? Hope you enjoy. We'll get back to that next video on in the next day or two, okay, for you, for my Western painters, okay? And I filmed a whole bunch of trays, which I can show you too, right over there. But I have a bunch of trays and stuff coming too for my flower painters, and I'll probably put those up on the other channel. But anyway, if you have any kinds of questions or anything, don't forget to fire those questions away down there, because I read those comments every day, and I try to answer them for you. And yes, those of you waiting for framing videos, we have some of those in the works right now too, because I made a whole bunch of really pretty frames for it. I want to show you how I made those frames. I put a picture of those on the community page if you want to see what some of the frames look like. So I'll be showing you how we go about putting those together. Really reasonable, really beautiful frames, really reasonable. Okay? All right. So I will let this dry, and I'll get this edited up for you, and then the next one will be on in the next day or two, and we'll finish up this entire painting. Okay? All right. I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks ever so much. Oh, don't forget to hit like. Please hit like on the video. That helps a lot. And subscribe. All right. See you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.